This happened over 10 years ago, but I still talk about it sometimes. It's my go-to scary story for campfires. My mom started leaving me home alone when I was 12 years old. I guess that's kind of young, but I was mature for my age, and she worked a lot. Those are my excuses anyway. We had a 2-bedroom apartment in a large complex, just off a major highway. I was alone one night as usual, while my mom worked a late shift. I was watching TV, and slowly chipping away at some homework. Out of nowhere, I heard a loud banging noise. I couldn't tell exactly where it came from, but I thought it was a gunshot. I had never heard a gunshot up close before, so I wasn't sure. The vibrations shook my young body to the absolute core. It was like I had been hit by a car. It was really intense. I immediately jumped onto the floor and hid under the coffee table. I could hear commotion outside the apartment in the hall, but I couldn't tell what was happening. The gunshots kept ringing in my ears, and I was really scared. I tried to stay calm, but my mind was racing with thoughts of what could be happening outside. I wanted to call the police, but I didn't have my phone within reach. It was in the other room charging, and I was too scared to move. I just lay there waiting. Suddenly the sound of sirens began. I mustered the courage to look out the window. At first it was just one police car, and then more started to arrive. Soon there were at least 12 cop cars and 2 fire trucks outside my building. I could hear voices outside, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. I started to feel sick to my stomach, and I wished my parents were there with me. I felt so scared and alone. After what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes, the commotion outside started to die down. I could hear police officers talking to each other, and the sound of radios crackling. I wondered what was going on, and if anyone had been hurt. Finally, there was a knock at my door. I froze for a moment. My mom always taught me not to open the door when I was alone, but if it was the police, then maybe that would be an exception. Then I heard a voice call out. He said it was the police and asked me to open the door. I slowly walked over and unlocked it. There were 2 police officers standing outside, and they looked very serious. One of them asked me if I was okay, and I nodded my head. I was crying at this point. He asked me if my parents were home, and I told him they weren't, but I gave him my mom's number. They talked to her on the phone, and waited with me until she got home. It turned out that my neighbor, who I had only seen a few times, was a wanted criminal. He'd been living there for a few months, and had killed at least 1 person. The police were called when his gun went off by accident. I was shocked, and I couldn't believe that someone like that had been living so close to me. The police officers told me that I was very brave for staying calm while everything was going on outside. The police sealed off the apartment for a few days afterwards. They used some kind of tape to seal off the door whenever the scene was left for a night or so. It left an adhesive residue on the door that never really came off. I lived in that building until I was 18, and every time I passed that door, I would see the marks and remember that night. I was 14 years old, and my parents had left me home for the weekend alone. They had gone on a business trip, and I was to stay at home by myself. My mom would often join my dad on business trips. His work had a strong social aspect, and it helps to have a guest. In the past, I would stay with my uncle on occasions like this, but he was busy, and my parents thought I was old enough to stay alone. I was excited for the weekend, and I planned on watching some TV and staying up late playing video games, all things I do normally anyway. The first night was normal. I stayed up late and watched TV with my best friend Ted, who lives down the street. Ted left at around midnight, and I went to bed an hour later. I was fast asleep by 1:30. Something woke me up in the middle of the night. I looked at my alarm clock, and it was 3:30 in the morning. There were strange noises coming from downstairs. It sounded like somebody was shuffling around on the floor. At first I thought I was dreaming, or still half asleep, so I rubbed my eyes and tried to go back to sleep, but the noises persisted. Despite this, I was so tired that I eventually just laid back down and dozed off. In the morning, I woke up to a strange feeling. The house was quiet. I was alone, so that was normal, but it felt weird. I can't explain exactly what I felt, but I knew something was off. I got up and went to the bathroom to wash my face, trying to shake off the feeling of unease. When I went downstairs, I couldn't believe what I saw. The living room was a mess. Couch cushions were strewn all over the floor. Drawers of the entertainment center were open, and papers were scattered everywhere. I felt a sense of dread in the pit of my stomach when I realized that my house had been robbed. I quickly checked the front door and saw that it was unlocked. There were no broken windows or anything. I realized the robbers had likely entered through the unlocked front door. I was pretty sure I left it unlocked. I felt guilty and foolish for that. The reality of the situation hit me, and I started to feel anxious. I didn't know what to do or who to call. I tried calling my parents, but they weren't answering their calls or texts. I was alone, scared, and vulnerable, and I was also worried that the robber would come back. I decided to call the police. They told me to wait outside until they arrived. I stood outside in my pajamas, shivering in the cold morning air, waiting for the police to arrive. When they got there, they let me tell them what happened for 10 minutes or so. Then they began investigating the scene. I watched as they dusted for fingerprints and took photos of the damage. It was a surreal experience, like something out of a crime movie. The police eventually left, and I was alone again. Over the next few days, I kept in touch with the police. They told me there had been a string of burglaries in the area, and they were working on several other cases that may be connected. That was surprising to me, because I thought our neighborhood was really safe. It was a small consolation, but at least I knew they were doing everything they could to catch those guys. In the end, the robbers were never caught. My parents were surprisingly understanding when I admitted to leaving the door unlocked. My dad said they would have gotten in anyway. I don't know if he believed that, or if he was just trying to make me feel better. Either way, I appreciated it. I was creeped out by the thought that I was alone in the house with them. I can't help but wonder what they would have done if I went downstairs when I started hearing those noises. Maybe they would have split, or maybe it would have been a lot worse for me. Who knows what they would have done to me? It could have been really bad. My name's Dennis, and I've lived in an apartment above a store for almost 5 years now. It's an old building, but it has character, and it's in a busy nightlife part of the city. I'm not much of a partier, but the area is filled with drunk people on the weekends, and even sometimes throughout the week. There's an unmarked door on the street right between two storefronts. It's pretty inconspicuous. Many people probably don't even notice it at first. It's always unlocked and anybody can get into my building and come right up to my front door without a key at all. There's one other apartment that I share this door with. The other apartment belongs to a pair of college students who I barely ever see. It was a typical Friday night. I had just returned from a night out with friends. It was around 1 a.m. and I was exhausted. I was ready for bed, so I went straight to my room and fell asleep. However, I woke up soon after to the sound of people in my living room. I initially thought it was just my roommate, but then I heard their voices and I knew it wasn't him. He was away for the weekend anyway, so I knew it couldn't be him. I got out of bed and tiptoed to my door to listen. I could hear two men talking, and they seemed to be drunk. I knew I had to act fast before things got out of hand. I took a deep breath and stepped out of my room. I saw two men standing there, and they were surprised to see me. One of them had a bottle of beer in his hand, and the other had a cigarette. They looked at me like I was an intruder. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to sound as tough as possible. The men just looked at me and laughed. They were clearly drunk and weren't taking me seriously. I could feel my heart rate increase, and I started to feel an adrenaline rush. I said, "What are you doing here?" "This is my apartment, and you need to leave now," I shouted. The men just laughed again, and continued to talk as if I wasn't even there. I could feel my frustration and anger building. I knew I had to do something to make them leave. "Get out of here now," I yelled, taking a step closer to them. That's when they got more aggressive. One of them pushed me back, and I stumbled into the coffee table, knocking over a glass. These guys were really drunk, and I didn't know what they were capable of. I ran to the bathroom and locked the door behind me. I don't think they chased me. I dialed 911, and within minutes the police arrived. They arrested the two men and took them away in handcuffs. I was shaken, but relieved it was all over. I talked to the police for a while, and I decided to follow through with pressing charges. They found that the men had entered through the unlocked door below my apartment. It seemed that I had forgotten to lock my door that night. It was an embarrassing mistake, and I could tell the police were annoyed with me. I can't say I blame them. I was tired, and I had been drinking too, but still, I felt dumb. This happened to me 7 years ago. I'm 20 years old now. My parents were away from home for a family emergency. I'm an only child, and whenever my parents left me home alone, I usually didn't get scared. It was the third night by myself. I was playing video games and eating junk food, and then I heard a knock at the door. I was wondering who could be knocking on someone's door at this late hour. I walked over to it, and I could see a man peeping through one of the small glass windows near the door. I could hear yelling. He was saying that he was really hurt and asked to come in. I asked what was wrong, and he said he had broken his foot. This seemed kind of weird to me. I asked him how he broke his foot. He told me he was taking a walk around the neighborhood and had tripped. He said his foot landed in an odd way. He was begging me and screaming. He said he would sue me if I didn't help him. I said I would call him an ambulance, and I told him to wait outside. After I said that, he said he would slit my throat and cut all my body parts in half. Then I grabbed my dad's shotgun, which he kept on the highest shelf in the kitchen. I also called the police. I told the man that the police were on their way, and he told me that they wouldn't make it in time. He was trying to bust open my dining room window. By the way he was hitting it, it looked like it was about to break. I quickly ran upstairs into my room and decided to hide under my bed. I called the cops again, and the operator told me they would be there in a couple minutes. As soon as the operator said that, I heard the window break. He must have found a big rock in my front yard. I could hear him checking all the rooms downstairs, and I heard him coming up the stairs. He checked my parents' bedroom. I could hear him rooting around through their closet. Then I heard him trying to open my door. I gripped the shotgun tightly in my hand and waited for him to break down the door. He was now kicking it as hard as he could. In a couple of hits, he knocked it down. I could see his feet. He tried to open the closet door in my room, which I had locked purposely to confuse him. He said, "I know you're in here." I was wondering if I should cut his legs or try to sneak past him and run out. I wouldn't be able to sneak out without making some kind of noise. At that moment, I'd forgotten I was under a bed, and I went up and hit my head, making a very loud noise. The man quickly turned around and said, "Oh, trying to be smart with me, huh?" Then I heard sirens. He said, "Oh crap, you got lucky this time, but you won't the next." He tried to run out of my room, but I grabbed his right foot, making him fall very hard to the ground. I was holding him with all my might. I heard the police rushing up the stairs, and they got a hold of the man. I came out with my shotgun, and the police were now pointing their guns at me. I quickly explained everything, and the police understood. Apparently, they found the man's van parked in front of my house. He had many sharp knives, duct tape, a camera, and rope. I can't imagine what he would have done to me if I hadn't thought to lock that closet door. The police called my parents and told them what happened. They came home 3 days early. My mom hugged me very tightly, and so did my dad. My mom told me that the man had been sentenced to 15 years in prison. We moved from that house a while later, and I had lots of nightmares about it. It took me a long time to get back to normal. I never stayed a night alone again until I moved out of my parents' house. I have 3 guns in my house now, just to be safe, in case anything happens again.